want you to remember this ayah, because it's going to become very important soon. Also, an adu is related to adu. Who's aduun mubin? Who is aduun mubin? The shaitan. So there's a relationship in sarf between these words, but it's just something interesting to mention. The fastest growing religion in America today, most of us say, is Islam. Guess what? It's not true anymore. The fastest growing religion in America today, brothers and sisters in Islam, is this category called the nuns. And I'm not referring to the Roman Catholic women who wear the headscarf. What is a nun? A nun is a non-affiliated person. So maybe they were raised Muslim, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Hindu, but they no longer associate with their religion. It also includes atheists, so people who reject a belief in God, and it also includes agnostics, people who neither reject or accept a belief in God. Look at the numbers. From 2007 to 2014, this group grew almost 25 million people. Wallahi, I don't know a masjid in America that doesn't do some kind of da'wah. But we don't have even close to these kind of numbers of people becoming Muslim. Not even close. But this group is growing exponentially. And it's all religious people being affected. So my next question after why are we losing faith is why is everyone losing faith? Not just Muslims, but Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Hindu. They all have a deen, but they're all losing members. What's happening? What's happening? And why is it, according to this statistic, higher in men and millennials? What is a millennial? A millennial is a person, if I understand this correctly, they were born around the 1990s. And they came of age in the millennium generation. So 2001. This group, while not constituting all of this category, they constitute the overwhelming majority of it. I'm going to try and explain why I think it's this group and what happened to them that caused them to lose faith. Now, when we talk about people who seek another way outside of marriage to gratify their sexual desires, what is that called in Arabic? Zina. Did the Prophet warn us about zina? Oh, you bet he did. He told us that zina, among other things, would do something very horrible to your faith. La yazni zani hina yazni wa huwa mu'min, he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That when a person commits fornication and adultery outside of marriage, they are not a believer. Let me translate this for you another way. Whenever you seek a way outside of the halal way to gratify your desires, Iman leaves you temporarily. According to the ulama, their explanation of this hadith is that when the person is committing the act of zina, then faith leaves them. What's going on? So let me try and explain to you psychologically speaking. And I'll let you see the English translation. Iman, we mentioned, is the belief in Allah and the angels and the books and the Day of Judgment. But there are certain types of sin that are such an aggression against Allah's limits that in order for you to go through with them, you have to temporarily suspend your belief in the unseen. It is highly unlikely that a person will go and commit fornication or adultery with someone they are not married to while they are fully conscious that Allah is watching them, the angels are recording them, the Quran says not to do it, the Prophet warns you about it, and on the Day of Judgment you're responsible for it. Very highly unlikely. What you have to do psychologically is you have to temporarily compartmentalize that belief in the back of your consciousness so that you can go through with the act of that sin. And then when that sin is over, like the end of the hadith says, then tawbah can be accepted. And that's why when people do it, they feel regretful, they feel bad, and they ask Allah to forgive them. For the vast majority of history, committing zina was very difficult. And I would say even today, the type of zina of the private part is quite difficult, even in modern Western culture. Did the Prophet limit zina to the zina of the private part only? Perhaps you've seen this before. In fact, he expanded the definition. He said that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is a portion of zina written for every human being. The zina of the eye, which is to lustfully stare at someone. The zina of the ear, which is to listen to sexually explicit language. The zina of the tongue, which is to say sexually explicit things. The zina of the hand, which is to touch things in a sexually explicit way. And finally, the zina of the feet, which is to go to the places where zina is committed. So the Prophet ﷺ didn't just say that zina was simply going and committing or having intercourse with someone. No. He said that there's other types of zina, and they all have the same consequence. When you do them, iman is cut off. Temporarily. So here's the English translation, for those of you who'd like to see it. So here's the list of how the Prophet ﷺ defined zina. Now, Allah warns us in the Quran about the shaitan, because the shaitan, he's kind of a bit of a scholar of Islam. Did you know that? He knows our deen also. And he knows about these ahadith. But one of the things that Allah has made binding on the shaitan is the shaitan has to tell you what he's going to do. He can know your deen, but he has to tell you what he's going to do. And how do we know what he's going to do? Because Allah said it as plain as day in the Quran. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, la tattabi'u khutuwati shaitan. وَمَنْ يَتَّبِعْ خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ فَإِنَّهُ يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ. O you who have the light of Iman inside of you, do not follow the incremental steps of the shaitan. Because anyone who follows the incremental steps of the shaitan, indeed, without a doubt, he will command you to do things that are disgusting and immoral. So I'm building a case for you now. So far we've talked about how Allah warned us in the Quran about not committing zina. That the consequences of committing zina is that you become an aggressor against Allah's limits. That it takes iman out of you. And that zina is not simply limited to intercourse, but it goes beyond that. So here's the English translation for those of you who'd like to read it. So then we have an important question. Knowing what the shaitan's plan is for us, does he have any new weapons today that he didn't have 100 years ago? Let's take a look at one of his weapons, shall we?
And the Prophet said that the fitan will be shown to the heart like a mat. It has two lines, a horizontal and vertical line. This is the TV set. This is the set. It's a hasir. It's a mat. And the Prophet said the fitan will be shown to the hearts like a mat. Kal hasir. And this is how shaitan is destroying the hearts, by showing them the fitan on these films and on TV over and over again until people just become accustomed to violence. It's a normal thing. They're not shocked by it anymore.
In Sahih Muslim, there is an amazing prophecy. Man, it's probably one of the reasons that I'm a Muslim today, because there's just no way the Prophet could have known this. One day, Umar ibn al-Khattab asked the people, does anyone remember that the Prophet warned us about a fitna that would come like waves of the ocean? ocean. Hulayfa radiallahu anhu, he said, yes, I remember this, and he began to narrate the following. He said that in the future, there would be fitan, multiple trials and temptations that would be presented to men's hearts like a mat is woven line by line. So it's flat, and it's line by line, like a, we call a rectangle. The heart which is filled by them will have a black mark put on it. So whoever looks into the mat, they're going to see fitan. The fitan will put black marks on their heart. And anyone who rejects what's in the mat, their heart will have a white mark put on it. The result will be that people will become of two types of hearts. One white, like white stone, which has and will not be harmed by any fitan or temptation, so long as the heavens and the earth endure. And another black and dust-covered, like a vessel which is upside down, mujahiyan, unable to hold anything good. And then the Prophet warns you. He says, that person will no longer be able to recognize what is good or what is evil, but will be filled with hawa, desires. So indeed, the Prophet ﷺ, who doesn't speak from his own, but he speaks through wahi from Allah, revelation, warned us about a tool at the end of time that the shaitan would use to blacken your heart. So here's the question. What is the fitna stealing from the hearts of Muslims today?
This is one of the most destructive aspects that shaitan now has. This destroys families, it destroys your heart, it will put out your inner eye. You will not be able to have any spiritual experiences. Your heart will become like that mujahiyan, what the Prophet ﷺ said, a vessel that can't carry any good. Because this is all hawa. And porne in Greek means prostitute. One of the tribulations is the faces of prostitutes. People, Allah, there are people that are punished by giving them the tribulation of looking at the faces of prostitutes. And this is basically anybody who's in these films is a prostitute. Male or female, they're selling their bodies. Look at the stats, people. Look at the Muslim countries. This is the searches per capita. Look what's happening to us. And then you're wondering why we're being, why this punishment is coming down on us. What's happening to our people? How has shaitan been able to do this? Because we forgot. We left all the protection. We left the awrad. We left the wird of the Quran. The ahraz that the Prophet gave us to say every morning and evening. We're supposed to say these things. There's evil in the world. We're supposed to seek protection from it. We're supposed to protect ourselves, guard our hearts. This thing is a precious thing. It was created to know Allah. It wasn't created for these things. And Islam is a pure religion. The Muslims that migrated out of India called it Pakistan, the land of purity. Muslims are supposed to be pak. They're supposed to be tayyib. The Prophet said, "At-tayyibun lit-tayyibat." This will corrupt the heart. It will make it aswad mirbad, black. Internet websites, 4.2 million, 12% of total websites. Pornographic pages, 372 million. These are sound stats. Daily pornographic search engine requests 68 million. 25% of total search engine requests. What's happening to us as a species? Daily pornographic emails, 2.5 billion. 8% of total email. What's happening to us?
Read the top of that. What does it say? It says that 90% people are watching this. And you don't think the Muslims are? That's epidemic numbers. That's your boss at work, your lawyer, your bus driver, the school principal, the teacher. That's everybody you know watching pornography. And you don't think young people are watching it? You don't think young Muslims and Christians and Jews are watching it? Pornography is 3 types of zina. The zina of the eye, the zina of the ear, and the zina of the hand. So when you watch this stuff, your iman is gone. We used to have this thing here in the United States a long time ago. Maybe some of the older people in the room still remember it. It's called a pilot light. What's a pilot light? It's a small flame that's always lit on your stove or always lit in your heater. And whenever you want the heat to come on, you turn on the gas and it hits the flame and it burns up and brighter. But when you look at pornography, when you commit zina, you blow out your pilot light. And it doesn't matter how much gas you put, it's not going to burn. So you can pray 5 times a day, you can read the Quran, you can fast Ramadan, you can make Hajj, you can make Umrah, you can memorize the Quran. Nothing is going to affect you because you blew out the light. And wallahi, everywhere I go, I talk to young Muslims who are utterly addicted to this. One very sad email that an imam received from a 16-year-old Muslim. He said, I'm addicted to pornography, and I've been addicted to it since I was 11 years old. And I can't stop, and I don't know how. This is what's destroying people's faith today. And we're going to explain how it's been done. How did it happen? You want to see the Futuwati Shaitan? Look at this. Pre-1800s, pornography's always been around, but it was in the form of rasam, like drawn pictures, or tamathil, like statues. But around the late 1800s, when the printing press and photography were invented, one of the first things that it was used for was the mass production of pornography. Then in the early 1900s, film theaters were invented, and so pornographic theaters became very popular. By the early 1970s, VHS tape was invented, and pornography became available in your home for the first time ever. In fact, I can confess to you, I grew up as a non-Muslim, and pretty much all of my friends found pornographic tapes in their parents' rooms. All of them. With the exception of a few, which I don't know if they ever did or not, because I never asked them. Then by the early 1990s, pay close attention to this statistics, because it's going to help things make a lot of sense for you. In the early 1990s, DVD pornography became available, and the first pornographic websites were up by 1994. So that's when online streaming pornography became available in the homes of people all over the world. What's the generation again that makes up the vast majority of people who left Islam? The people born in the early 1990s who came of age in the millennium. The generation with 24-hour access to pornography. How did they get it today? It's so easy today. You see, the shaitan used to have to go find a person to commit zina with. It was very difficult. Then he figured out a way for you to commit zina without even needing another person. But still, you couldn't just do it anytime you want because you had to go to the places where you could see it. Now, the vast majority of pornography is watched on these things. This is the loaded weapon that you bought your children and never taught them how to use. And they keep shooting their iman in the head every day. They watch pornography all day long. You want to see some pretty scary statistics? In 2017, one pornographic website reported having 28.5 billion annual visits, enough for 3.75 visits per person on Earth. With 81 million average daily visits, almost a quarter of the American population. This site alone had over 4 million videos totaling 68 years of continuous pornographic video. 10 million gigabytes of data per day, enough to fill every iPhone on Earth. 26% of visitors were female. It's the 73rd most popular site on the internet. Porn sites receive more regular traffic than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined each month. Can you believe that? How many people use Twitter and Netflix? And it's more than that. 35% of all internet downloads are porn related. Porn is a global estimated business of almost $100 billion. 11 is the average age children are exposed to. 94% of children have seen pornography by the age of 14. 94%. Are your children Amish? Do they live in the woods? No. So they're probably included in these numbers, but we can't say for certain. They found that 73% of women and 98% of men reported internet pornography use in the last 6 months. They've actually tried to do studies on college campuses about pornography, and they need a test group of people who don't watch it. They can't even find a single man on campus who doesn't watch it. That ain't the law. That's where your iman is going. It's gone. It's gone. Because of this. This statistic is probably the most scary of all. There's a 1 in 17 chance every time a child logs onto the internet that they will accidentally see pornography. So it's your 6th birthday, and you get on your iPhone or your iPad or your laptop, and you look up the number 6, but you misspell it. God knows what you're about to see. Most of these facts I got from Psychology Today, which is a well-known psychological paper. It's about 58 years old. The Chicago Tribune has also done articles in this, and there's a very good website I suggest for parents. It's called Fight the New Drug. It is an anti-porn website. It has lots and lots of articles about the industry. You don't have to go watch the videos to see what goes on, because there's people who've already done that for you, and they can tell you exactly what happens in these movies and in the industry. There's people who've left the industry and written about their experiences. So they have a lot of good articles. How are the Muslims being affected? Wallahi, we're in the movies. We're in the porn movies. I showed this picture to a group of 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old Muslim girls at a conference, and wallahi, they said this woman's name. They knew her name. You don't think the boys know who this is? This is our sister in films doing things that, wallahi, I can't even tell you in a masjid what she does, because it's so disgusting that it would probably make you vomit. And she does it with a hijab on, so everyone knows her Muslim name, her Muslim headscarf, that she's a Muslim, and she's making zina on film for the whole world to see. And she's not the only one. One male Muslim pornographer, first name Abdullah, he claims to be with over 5,000 partners in over 1,500 films. One Syrian refugee in Germany joined the porn industry. He wrote on his Twitter account, "Alhamdulillah for my career in the adult film industry." What's happening in these movies? I mean, I hate to tell you guys this, but you gotta know. What did Allah say about the shaitan? إِنَّهُ يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ. The #1 type of pornography downloaded is homosexual and lesbian pornography. You want to know why all of a sudden in the last 20 years, this country went from being an extremely conservative place where homosexuality used to be considered a mental illness in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, to now homosexuals are getting married? Because that's what people are watching. You want to know why all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we want women to go to the men's bathroom and men to go to the women's bathroom? Well, here's your answer. The second most popular type of pornography on these websites is incest porn. This is disgusting. Men and women actors pretending to be part of the same family engaging in acts of zina on film. A mother and a daughter, a father and a daughter. Pedophilia porn. Actors who dress up as younger than their age in order to portray themselves as being under the age of 18 while they commit zina on film. Disgusting. Sodomy on men and women, so liwat porn. Gang rape porn. So one woman and 20 guys. One guy and 100 women. And finally, transgender porn. So pornography where women dress like men and men dress like women. Some of these types of pornography, I can't even tell you what they are. It's so disgusting. And this is the #1 stuff being downloaded. So when we talk about this large, massive number of people watching porn, that's what we're talking about. That's what they're watching. And you don't think that's having an effect on them? Almost 1 in 6 women in America now are sexually abused, and 1 in 20 men. That's astoundingly high numbers of people. So, don't take my word for it. Let's hear what non-Muslim psychologists have to say about pornography and what it does to you. Just like there's Narcotics Anonymous for people who are addicted to cocaine and methamphetamines, there is Alcoholics Anonymous for people who are addicted to drinking and can't stop. There is Sexaholic Anonymous for people who are absolutely addicted to pornography. Why, you ask? Well, let's see what they have to say. It says there are social motivations to the use of pornography, but there are also neurochemical processes which may reinforce and drive pornographic use. For example, the neurotransmitter dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in your brain that is released that makes you feel pleasure. It's the same neurotransmitter released when you snort cocaine, when you smoke marijuana, when you drink alcohol, and yes, when you watch pornography. This neurotransmitter, which plays a role in sexual behavior, may also help mediate reward and reinforcement in sexual functioning. Dopamine is intimately involved in the addictive behaviors and involved in the feelings of elation, craving, and desire and anticipation. That's why young people can't stop. But this shouldn't be a surprise to us because Allah already told us. زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتُ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. Sisters, take special note of this ayah. Allah is trying to tell you something. That the #1 thing on the list of things that men desire is women. Above everything else, gold, silver, cars, houses, land, property. The #1 thing on our list that Allah is exposing us is the love and desire of women. So it should not become a surprise to us whatsoever that when men are exposed to the bodies of women, they become addicted to it. What do PhD psychologists say about the effects of pornography? I want you to remember the information I gave you at the beginning because it's about to come home. Porn leads to a faith crisis and a rejection of God's laws and the Sharia. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, they said that apart from its sexual element, pornography became a powerful vehicle for social and political protest. It provided a vehicle for the exploration of daring ideas that were condemned by both church and state, meaning the Sharia of the religions, including sexual freedom for women, which let me translate that for you, meaning women should be able to go out and commit zina without any shame, as well as men, and the practices of contraception, because if you're going to commit zina, you don't want to have children, so you have to practice a method of preventing pregnancy from taking place. And of course, it leads to an acceptance of abortion, because sometimes what happens is the lady gets pregnant. And what do you do if she gets pregnant? You kill the baby. Don't ever let anyone shove this word into your vocabulary. There's no such thing as abortion. It's called kill the baby. And don't ever forget it, because that's what it means. Much of pornography also focused on the misdeeds of royals and the aristocracy, thereby contributing to the discrediting of elites of Europe, and perhaps also mentioned by these two authors. So let me try to explain to you what Britannica is telling you. It said that pornography is actually used to destabilize society. It causes people to reject hierarchy. Because the Sharia, and it doesn't matter if it's our Sharia or the Christian Sharia or the Jewish Sharia, all says that this is wrong. But as you start to watch it more and more and more, a contradiction starts to take place inside of your nafs. And your nafs does not like contradiction. What's the contradiction? Well, I'm Muslim and Allah says not to do this, but I'm doing it anyway. And I can't stop. So maybe the problem is not with the porn, but the problem is with Allah. And that's where the switch takes place. And then it's not just a problem with Allah, it's a problem with the imam, it's a problem with the masjid, it's a problem with the government. Everything starts to crumble before your eyes, because you start to see anything and everything that prevents you from craving this sin and indulging in it as wrong. According to Reason magazine, feminists, a lot of them hate pornography because they know that pornographic films portray women in a demeaning and disrespectful way. But they said that, yet after comparing people who watch porn with those who don't, researchers found those who had watched an adult film at least once in the past year held more egalitarian ideas about women in positions of power, and in women taking work outside the home, along with more positive views towards abortion. Let me translate for you what they're saying. That people who had only watched porn once in an entire year already started to see the Sharia is wrong. Because the Sharia says that men are supposed to be in charge. The Sharia says that men are supposed to go work. But they're saying that just one porn use was enough to cause people to see that is wrong. No, no, no. Women need to be in charge. Men need to stay home and women need to go work. Not only that, their ideas about pornography, their ideas about abortion, of course, become more pro-abortion. Now, I told you that the shaitan, Allah, has promised to make sure that he tells you what he's going to do. Well, this is the #1 shaitan psychologist I found. And this is what he has to say, because he loves the fact that you're watching pornography, because he knows exactly what it's doing to you. It's exactly what he wants done to you. He says, from Psychology Today, you need to watch more porn. An interesting effect happens as people watch pornography. They become more egalitarian and more supportive of women and men sharing roles and work. Less accepting of gender-based discrimination. They also become more accepting of sexual diversity and less stigmatizing towards homosexuality. They become less religious and may even experience more crises of faith. Enjoying porn leads to people changing their beliefs about sex and gender, and in some cases rejecting the dogmaticality, is that how you say that? Rigid gender values they were taught in church. So what's Dr. Lay telling us? Let me translate it for you. He's saying that porn use leads to you rejecting traditional roles of men and women in society as dictated by religious institutions. You become more open-minded about deviant sexual practices like homosexuality and sodomy or liwat, more open to gender mixing, and likely to support promiscuity like zina and abortion. And he knows it, because he's done the studies and found out. But the #1 thing that he found out, which supports my thesis all along, is that porn leads to anger towards God. When religious people use more porn, their anger towards God and their general irritability both increase, he says. Because when you become al-adun, an aggressor against Allah's hudud, you transgress his limits, then you start to hate God, you start to hate yourself, you start to hate your family, you hate your religion, you hate everything. You become generally angry all the time. You want to know why you're so angry? We're about to explain to you why. Because you're watching people being raped on film. And they're miserable. And you're deriving pleasure from that if you watch it. And that's the punishment you receive. Porn leads to depression. It appears that both married and single men report moderate levels of depression. While the scores of married men were lower than single men, there was not a significant difference between their scores. However, frequency of viewing pornography was related to higher levels of depression in both married and single men. In fact, regardless of relationship status, individuals who viewed pornography daily were on the border of severe depression. This is the mother of all pieces of evidence right here. The Israeli Defense Force uses pornography as a weapon. In 2000, the Israeli Defense Force took over 3 of the 4 Palestinian public access television stations, and they began to play pornographic videos 24 hours a day. Now I want to ask you a question, because you're smart people. Nobody in here is a dummy. Why would a military establishment who collects money through taxes from their people, who puts the lives of military people on the line, break into a television station to play pornography for their enemy unless they knew that it would do something to you? Wallahi, if this doesn't wake you up, I don't know what will. They know that pornography destabilizes people. They know that it causes them crises in faith, that it disunites them, that it destroys them, and it makes them weak, and it's easier to fight them. And it's being used as a weapon on everybody today. If you allow them to do it to you by accessing that filth.
You know the amazing thing about the human brain and eyes, you can't unsee and you can't unremember what you saw. So my first look at pornography was by mistake. You know, I actually walked into, we did an exam, kids were on break, they went and got a VCR, a bunch of stack of videos, when I was in college, just entered college, and I walked into their room, and I walked in, I turned to the right, and I saw the image on the television. I didn't know what I was going to see, and I'd never seen it before, but I remember that image right now. To this day, if I close my eyes right now, I can remember that image. I know exactly what was going on, the scenario, the place, what was happening. That first image was 40 years ago. Okay, it was 25 years ago, making myself older, sorry. I should be subtracting. Anyway, the problem is, you know, we're not like a computer. We can't go and delete our hard drive. And the worst part about it is that when you're in solitude, when your eyes are closed, when you're trying to think about your Lord, and when you're trying to pray, that's when it gets you. It's not sitting here right now, you know, that I wouldn't have that image pop into my brain. And alhamdulillah, one of the things I realized is some of those kids that were my friends, once they got a taste of it, man, they would make a straw as long as a mile wide to get more. And for me, I looked at it, and alhamdulillah, I swear, I make dua, I do shukr to Allah that this day that my initial reaction was disgust. Because had it not been, you don't know. You're just rolling the dice. You don't know if you're going to get a 1 or a 6. And a 6 means you're in, man. You cannot get out of that. You're gonna fight with that for the whole life. I was disgusted by it, and I still remember it. Right? And alhamdulillah, whenever I came across it, I didn't need it. I didn't have to affect it. But those kids that went into it, I couldn't be friends with them anymore because they were on a track where they wanted something different. And let's be real, boys on the internet, it's visual, it's porn. Girls, what they want is validation. Friends. You want to be with 17 friends. Oh, does she like me? Does she think I'm a friend? Does she like my picture? How do I look? Do I get validation? So the addiction is very different for girls and boys. So we have two different things that we need to watch. So I wanted to show this perspective and my perspective. You know, what do we do when we're not looking at it? We check sports stores. Of course, not that harmful. But
so what this, mashallah, brother is telling you, young people in the room, is that as someone who had never seen pornography in his life, when he was in college, he walked into a room of his friends and they were watching pornography, and he saw the image for the first time and he immediately turned away from it in disgust. But he says that even 25 years later, he still remembers that image. He can't get it out of his head. And we have Muslims watching this stuff every day. You know, I'm not sure how computers work anymore, but for the longest time you had a desktop. And on the desktop you had the most important recent files that were all there for you to click as soon as your computer came on. And then you had other files that were inside of folders, and you had to click on the folder and go find the file. And then you had other files that you really you hadn't accessed them in weeks, months, years. They were compressed and stored way, way back in the hard drive. They're very hard to find. When you watch pornography all the time, you're putting pornographic images all over your desktop. So that whenever you're trying to pray, all of a sudden they pop into your mind. Whenever you're at home alone in your room, all of a sudden they pop into your mind. So what the shaitan has actually figured out a way to do is to get you to commit zina all the time. 24 hours a day, you can't get it off your mind. And it's constantly turning your reproductive system on, turning your reproductive system on, turning it on, turning it on, turning it on. And you have to do something about it. So what's the good news? Well, we mentioned that in Muslim countries, pornography is one of the highest viewed things. But there's something that's happening in Muslim countries that's quite unique. Muslim countries have a higher bounce rate. What's a bounce rate? So whenever you visit any website on the internet, that website records how long you're there. Are you there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes? And if you're only there for a few seconds, then you're counted as what's called a bounce. Meaning someone came into the site and immediately bounced out. The bounce rate in Muslim countries is actually higher. Now my theory is that in Muslim countries, we still have Iman. And when people either intentionally or unintentionally open up a pornographic website, they immediately recognize that what they're doing is wrong and they leave it. And that should be our response, because it's inevitable that you're going to come across it. If 94% of children have seen it by the time they're 14, it's going to happen if it hasn't happened already. So how do you respond? The response is to immediately get yourself out of that situation. Shut your computer down and walk out of the room. Turn your phone off, throw it away, and just walk and go do something else. If it's a friend doing it, immediately get yourself out of the situation. Leave. Because if you don't, you're going to allow that image into your heart, and it's going to blacken your heart. And it's going to suck Iman immediately out of your body. So what's happening is that we have a natural response in the Muslim world of tawbah. It's fitrah inside of you to see this stuff as disgusting. Listen to this Psychology Today article. It says that, but even further they found that in a large sample of adults, that religious individuals, including Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims, are far more likely to report feeling addicted to pornography, meaning that they think that it's wrong what they're doing. But listen to the highlighted part. Atheists and people with lower religious beliefs were much less likely to report problems with their own porn use, or to describe themselves as porn addicts. Meaning that the iman that's inside of you, that light that Allah put in all of us, immediately when you do things like that, and it's put out, you feel it. You feel the emptiness inside of you. And an atheist, he's already put his light out. His light's been gone, so he or she doesn't feel it anymore. They don't care. But for you as a believer whose parents hopefully taught you how to pray and how to read Quran, and brought you to the masjid and took you to Islamic school, they wanted that light inside of you to be bright. So if you engage with this stuff, you might put it out temporarily, but inshallah it'll come back on. But the more you do it, and the more you do it, and the more you do it, eventually, بَلْ رَانَ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ, you will seal your heart. So then, what's the solution? Brothers and sisters in Islam, the solution to the problem is that you have to make tawbah. The first step of tawbah is that you need to recognize that this is wrong. Now, I've already explained to you that it's wrong from the point of view of the Sharia. That Allah, His Messenger, the books, everything has told us that it's wrong. It's wrong in Christianity, it's wrong in Judaism, it's wrong in Buddhism, it's wrong in Islam. But I don't want you to just hear our side of it. I want you to hear someone who's not even a Muslim tell you that it's wrong. So what I'm about to play for you is Chris Hedges. He's a friend of the Muslim community, but he's not Muslim. He was a war correspondent who reported on the Iraq War. He suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder because when you are stuck in a war zone and you're seeing people killed in front of your eyes, it causes you deep psychological trauma. He wrote a book in which he went to the porn industry and he interviewed porn stars about their experiences in these movies, and this is what he had to report.
And I get very angry with the liberal class on the left over their refusal to condemn pornography. Why is it morally indefensible to physically abuse a woman in a sweatshop in the Philippines or in southern China, but somehow it's an issue of free speech when it's done by the sex industry in the United States? When I started interviewing these women who came out of the porn industry, having suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, I instantly, after literally a minute or two, said, "Oh, these people all have PTSD." And I wrote it graphically and brutally, and I think intended to engender a kind of disgust. I never write in the chapter we should or shouldn't ban porn. I just said, if you want to defend porn, then you better understand what it is you're defending. These women, and they're just thrown up, they last 1 or 2 years on sets, and then, if they continue within the industry, they just, in essence, become call girls, shipped around the country in hotel rooms, which is awful. But they're popping handfuls of painkillers before they go on the sets. This violence, which sells, and porn it's not the soft-lit porn of the Playboy channel anymore. It's so-called gonzo porn. The violence is not simulated, it's real. These women are black and blue by the time they finish. They are constantly going in for surgery.
Did you hear what he said? He said, while he interviewed each and every one of these porn stars, the first thing he recognized about them is that they were all suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, just like he did from being in a war zone. That in order to perform the disgusting and demoralizing acts of sex on camera that they're asked to do, they have to pop fistfuls of OxyContin, which is essentially heroin, so that they're so numb and wasted that they don't feel all the pain that they're experiencing, the physical and psychological pain. And that by the time these movies are finished, their bodies are black and blue, and that they're so traumatized that they have to go in for surgery to repair parts of their body that have been ripped and torn. These women are being raped on film. And just because they signed a consent form doesn't mean they wanted to do it. In fact, most likely, according to interviews I've read, they're addicted to drugs. They're being forced to do it because they're being sex trafficked. They're so far in debt to their debtors that they have no choice but do this to earn enough money to pay back the money they owe because of drug addiction. And and most of them suffer from sexually transmitted diseases. So while they may have a beautiful smile on their face while they're doing these things, don't ever forget that this is all an illusion. They're actresses and actors, and the only reason they're doing this is because they're so wasted on drugs that they don't feel it. Pornography is evil. The next step of Tawbah is that you have to make a sincere Tawbah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu tubu ila Allahi tawbatan nasuha. This is not astaghfirullah. Real Tawbah, brothers and sisters in Islam, is when you say that this is evil, this is wrong, this is stealing Iman out of me, this is going to take me to the hellfire, and I'm going to burn because of this. No, no thank you. Allah, forgive me for doing this. Forgive me for transgressing your limits and doing what you plainly warned me was wrong. Forgive me. That's real Tawbah. You turn away from this stuff and you get back on the Sirat al-Mustaqim, and you have no intention of going back, because you're going to do the following two things. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فَرُوجَهُمْ. The way you're going to stay away from this stuff is you're going to disengage from the content completely. You're never going to look at this stuff again, and anytime it comes into your life, you're immediately going to leave that situation if it's the only thing you know to do. And you're not going to allow your private parts to be violated anymore. But you're also going to change your lifestyle. So my final advice to the Muslim community is this, to parents. Wallahi, I know you're going to hate what I'm about to say. You're going to think I'm crazy. But drastic times call for drastic measures. You got to get this thing out of your house. You got to get this thing out of your house. You got to get this thing out of your house. You got to get all of it out of your house, because it's doing nothing but destroying your families. Wallahi, I wish you could talk to the parents I know whose children have left Islam, and how miserable they are. How their mothers cry every night. It's ruined their families. I wish you could see the brothers and sisters I know who used to come to the masjid every day and pray Fajr and Isha and sit in classes and fast on Mondays and Thursdays, and then they got on this porn, and wallahi, they're gone. They've never come back. Brothers and sisters in Islam, this will destroy you, and parents, you better wake up, because you're giving them access to it. Porn is free. It's free. Anytime anybody wants to access it, they don't have to pay a penny. The best thing you can hope for is that the website will say, are you 18 or older? Click yes or no. That's the most kind of controls you'll find. You want to know if your children are watching pornography? Did you give them one of these? Do they have an iPad, an iPhone? Do they have a laptop? Are they in their room alone? Is the door locked? What do you think they're doing? So get these things out of your home. I don't have a television. My children have never had smartphones. The only time they look at a screen is if I call my family overseas in Yemen. That's it. Other than that, no access to these things. Zero. And inshallah, Allah, I ask you to keep me firm on this. I will never, ever, ever, ever buy my children any of these things. I don't care what people think about me or what they think about them, because I know what they do. And, you know, the idea, I'm just going to be honest with you, brothers and sisters in Islam, a man hits his sexual peak at the age of 19. Meaning that the most shahwa he's ever going to have, he has at the age of 19. So from the moment a boy hits puberty until the age of 19, their hormones are raging. And these children are not married. And then you send them off to college without any kind of spouse. In this environment, where 90% of people are watching this filth, and you think they're just going to be little angels? That's totally unrealistic. Totally and completely unrealistic. To you, brothers and sisters, I feel for you. I know that this is incredibly difficult. I know there's probably some people in this room tonight who are addicted to this stuff already. I don't know who you are, and you don't need to tell me. You don't need to tell anybody. We're not Roman Catholics. We don't have to confess our sins to people. But you've got to start making a plan today to stop this before it totally destroys you. Number one, try to avoid being alone. Because when you're alone is when you commit the sin. Nobody watches pornography in public in front of people. It's all done alone. Number two, you have to pray on time. If I had to say the number one thing I see in all ex-Muslims is that they stop praying. When you stop praying, and the shaitan knows what pornography does to you, it puts you in a state of janaba. You can't touch the mushaf, you can't pray, you can't go to the masjid, you can't make tawaf. You're in a state of janaba, you have to take a ghusl. That's why he wants you to watch pornography, because it will force you to be in a situation where you can't pray. And there's only so many times a day you're going to take a bath before you get sick of it. And you're just going to watch the porn and not pray. And you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you very clearly in the Quran what the shaitan's plan for you. He says, Yuridu shaitan. Shaitan desires for you. وَيَسُدُّكُمْ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَعَنِ الصَّلَاةِ. That the number one thing he wants you to do is abandon remembering Allah and get you to stop praying. Because when you don't pray anymore, you have no more protection. So you need to learn to pray on time and stay in a state of wudu. You cannot do that watching pornography. Try to avoid mixing with the opposite gender because it's going to trigger you. Okay? Because one of the things pornography does to your brain is it trains you to look at the opposite gender as simply an object of your desire. When you're not looking at pornography, you're looking at people in a pornographic way. And let's be honest, the way men and women dress in public today is worse than the way prostitutes dressed in public in the 1950s. Worse. There's literally not a crack or crevice of their body that you can't clearly see in public. From little children all the way to 90-year-old women, it's disgusting. And people just don't seem to see anything wrong with it because they're all watching porn. And you have to make the daily recitation of the Quran a part of your life. I feel very saddened that last night very few of you were able to come to my lecture on how to recite the Quran properly. Because the Quran is Allah's speech. If you want to talk to God, that's how you do it. Allah talks to you through the Quran. And when He talks to you, it brings Allah to your mind. It turns on the light of Iman inside of you. And as long as Allah is on your mind, you're not going to watch pornography. You'll feel too much shame. And you have to make voluntary fasting a part of your life. Why did the Prophet recommend fasting for young, unmarried men? Who knows the answer? Okay? Helps you to lower your gaze and protects you from doing inappropriate things with your private parts. I'm going to give you an answer from the Quran. By the way, thank you for that hadith. Fasting is one of the few things in the Quran Allah tells you exactly why He wants you to do it. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That the reason He's prescribed fasting for believers, people with Iman, is to increase their taqwa. What is taqwa? So let's pretend for a moment I'm a new Muslim. I just accepted Islam 2 weeks ago, and all of a sudden Ramadan just began. And I work in an office high-rise, in a room all by myself with a computer. And I'm new to Ramadan. And I forgot to tell my boss I'm fasting. So 12 o'clock comes and I get a knock on the door. It's the food delivery guy. He comes every day. And the company pays for it. He walks in, sets the food down on the table, says thank you, and leaves. The door shuts. No one can see me. Smells good. Sure am hungry. Didn't grow up fasting. But Allah sees me. And the angels are recording. Quran said don't eat during Ramadan. And the Prophet also said don't eat during Ramadan. And on the Day of Judgment, I'm responsible if I did. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That's what it does to you. It increases your consciousness of the unseen. And therefore, you are protected from committing major sins. In addition to what the brother said. And then, the last piece of advice to young people is you have to make something called wird a part of your life. Awrad, dhikr. And I'm not talking about saying subhanallah or alhamdulillah 1,000 times every day. I'm talking about what's called adhkar al-masa' wa adhkar al-sabah. Every morning and every evening, the Prophet ﷺ used to recite قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ 3 times. He used to say, أَعُوذُ بِكَلِمَاتِ اللَّهِ التَّامَّاتِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. I seek refuge in the perfect words of Allah from the evil of what He's created. He used to say, بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الَّذِي لَا يَضُرُّ مَعَ اسْمِهِ شَيْءٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي السَّمَاءِ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. So, these awrad, this dhikr that you're saying, you're asking Allah to protect you from all kinds of evil. And once again, what does dhikr do? It keeps Allah on your mind. And therefore, you're not likely to go commit shameful acts of sin. And remember, the number one thing on the shaitan's list, يَصُدُّهُمْ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. He wants you to stop remembering Allah because it's so much easier to destroy your faith after that. And then this is probably the hardest piece of advice for the Muslim community to wake up, is that we have to start facilitating marriage for our young people. The idea that your children have to wait until they finish their bachelor's, master's, PhD, gotten a nice job, bought a house and a car, and then finally when I'm 30 years old, I can get a wife, is utterly ludicrous in the modern world. The likelihood that you are not going to fall into zina is so small with its free, unimpeded accessibility in the modern world. We have to start teaching our children before puberty, you're going to get married. And I'm going to help you, and your spouse's family are going to help you. If we have to fund your apartment, and we have to help you find a job, and make sure you get the skills trained to provide for your family, we're going to do it because we want to protect you. And I'm sorry if you don't like what the Prophet did. I'm sorry if you don't like what he did, but he married Ali when he was 14 years old, and he married Fatima when she was 13 to Ali. And up until December 31st of last year in Vermont, that was totally legal. And still in some states in America, there is no limitation on how early you can get married. Does that mean that you have to get married when you're 14 or 13? No. But the idea that you're going to wait until long after your own sexual peak and protect yourself, it's just not. It doesn't make any sense, guys. It doesn't. So we need to start facilitating marriage for young people. Helping them get married and helping them get married early. This has always been a part of the Muslim Ummah up until the modern period. In the modern period, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know where we came up with this. And some of this is due to these ridiculous mahar expenses and wedding costs that the sisters and their families are imposing on men. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if a good man comes to you, he has good akhlaq, he's a practicing Muslim, and you reject his proposal, then Allah will cause fitna to spread in the land. So brothers and sisters in Islam, I've really tried to do my best tonight to show you what I've come to realize after traveling to almost 200 Muslim communities. I have so many personal stories I can tell you about how pornography has destroyed people's lives, especially their faith. And I think that this presentation does a very good job of explaining why in the modern period, when pornography became available in people's homes, 24 hours accessible on their phones and laptops, that is when you see this massive rise in people leaving religion all over the world, especially in the West. The Prophet also mentioned drug use, and he also mentioned theft would cause the same effect in you. And if the shaitan hasn't gotten our youth with pornography, he gets our youth with marijuana and cocaine and methamphetamine and lean and all of these other drugs. And some of you, unfortunately, go to these insane doctors who tell you that your children need to take intoxicating drugs, and you get these things prescribed to them. It's not good for them. It steals iman. And finally, the modern form of theft, if the shaitan figured out a way to get you to commit zina without needing another person, well, now he's figured out a way to help you commit theft without actually taking anything physical. What do people do today? So you want a CD, new album came out, you go online and you steal it. You want to watch a new movie, still in the theaters, you go online, you steal it. You want to read a book, you don't want to pay for it, you go online, you steal it. And digital theft has the same consequence as physical theft. It will take iman out of your heart. So I've done my best, brothers and sisters in Islam. You feel free to disagree with my conclusions. I think I've presented the evidence in the best way I can. There's more that I could say, but I don't want to keep you here all night. We end tonight by turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in supplication. Allahumma inna nas'aluka bi anna laka al-hamd ya hanan ya badi'us samawati wal ard ya dhal jalali wal ikram ya hayyu ya qayyum. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala sayyidina wa habibina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma rabbana zalamna anfusana wa in lam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna min al-khasirin. O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, indeed we have wronged ourselves. And if you don't forgive us and have mercy on us, then we will certainly be in the hellfire. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. O Allah, do not cause our hearts to deviate from the religion of Islam after you've guided us, and you are the one who certainly bestows faith on people. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. O Allah, let us see truth as truth and follow it, and let us see falsehood as falsehood and keep us away from it. اللهم أرنا الأشياء كما هي. O Allah, let us see things as they truly are. Allahumma ya muqallibat qulub, thabbit qulubana ala dinik. O the one who bestows faith on the heart, do not cause our hearts to deviate from the faith of Islam. Allahumma yahdi shababat al-muslimin ya arhamar rahimin. O Allah, we ask you to send guidance upon the young Muslims all over the earth. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. O Allah, we ask you to accept this night from us. We ask you to forgive us, for truly you're the only one who's able to forgive sins. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك وجزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Do we have any? We're going to do a small Q&A session. I'd be happy to fill this. Bismillah.
You mentioned, getting married early for you. You said,
Let me give you a caveat to that, by the way. If you discover that your children are addicted to pornography, then getting married for them is the worst option, because it will destroy their marriage. It's well-known, established fact that spouses who watch pornography typically become disinterested in their spouse and more interested in pornography, and it destroys their marriage. So if a person is already addicted to this, then it will immediately destroy their marriage right off the bat, as soon as their spouse discovers that they're doing it. So that's my only caveat to that recommendation. Married people who are good practicing Muslims, if a person is addicted to pornography, they need treatment. We mentioned treatment tonight is Tawbah, followed up by Salah, Wudu, Quran, Dhikr, and fasting. That is the treatment program for pornography addiction.
My question was, you said, your family, or, let's say the bride's family, we can help you find an apartment, we can help you find a job, and so on. But what about education? Like if they need to go to school, they want to go to college?
Thank you so much for asking that question.
Don't leave anybody, sit down.
What's your fear? That if someone gets married, they can't get educated?
Yep. That's my question.
Where did you get that idea?
Because I've seen people, if you get married, you have responsibilities. You're not going to go to school full time.
No, my brother. There are all kinds of people going to school right now who are married. In fact, being married gives you a halal outlet for your God-given sexual desires. Okay? And because of that, there's blessings. Allah says in the Quran that if they are poor, let them be patient until Allah provides for them. Allah wants people to get married. The shaitan wants you to stay single. And so marriage is a way to put barakah in your wealth and time. The idea that somehow when I get a spouse, I don't have time to learn is ridiculous and unfounded. I know people right now who are in college who got married. They have no issues going to school, and they're working. So they have a halal outlet for their God-given sexual desires, so that they're not doing anything wrong. They're going to college and working to pay for it at the same time. They're not complaining at all. And their friends are addicted to pornos. So please, brothers and sisters in Islam, get this silly idea out of your mind. I'm not picking on you, by the way. It's not just you, it's most of the Muslim community. That getting a young person married is going to destroy their life. They won't get educated, they won't be able to find a nice job. No, no, no. Impossible that that would be the case. That Allah would give you a halal thing to do and punish you for it. No, brothers and sisters in Islam. That's the wrong mentality. And thank you for asking that question, because this is important, and you're not the only one who had that question on your mind.
Okay.
I didn't know who was first, so.
Always the older one first.
Yeah.
Age before
His beard is longer than
Who is the you?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was referring to him. Go ahead.
No, but you all talk about pornography. Yeah, that's okay. But the issue in the community, every community has a boyfriend and girlfriends. They keep changing. So what is that? You didn't talk about that thing. Like that is the biggest issue we see.
No, pornography is way bigger, actually, because not every
They
guy
want
can
to
get
have
a
boyfriend,
girlfriend.
they had girlfriend,
Yeah,
boyfriend, girlfriend.
not every guy can get a girlfriend, and not every girl can get a boyfriend, but every girl and guy can access pornography. However, that does not discount the fact that people are actually committing zina of the private part. Okay, and you're absolutely right. We have children in our community who are engaged in sexual activity outside of marriage, and it will have the exact same effect on them that pornography will. And so, yes, this is definitely a problem, but I see the pornography as a bigger problem. I'm not discounting. Remember, tonight's lecture is not about covering every single reason people lose faith. I'm talking about the modern attack on the world. People have been having boyfriends and girlfriends for a very long time now. But this pornography thing just recently attacked our ummah. It's a new thing. The ulama have not even had time to respond to it. And I tried my best to show you when this apostasy from religion began. Is it right around the same time this digital pornography came into people's homes and on their phones? So I'm not discounting the reality that yes, we do have Muslims engaging in this. And I'm telling you, do you know where they get the idea to do it in the first place? From watching the pornos. That's what causes them to want to go act out what they see in these films. You know, this idea that so many children today are engaging in sexual activities, there's been numerous articles written about this. A lot of them were sexually abused. In other words, someone in their family was a pornography addict and molested them, and then it was imposed on them at an early age to be sexually active. So they become sexually active at an early age, and they start teaching other children to become sexually active. Like well beyond what would be considered normal. So, and I know this for a fact because I have a friend that I grew up with. He was very promiscuous growing up. You know, he had lost his virginity very early on in life. He had multiple partners growing up, and I could never understand why he was like this until it was revealed to me that his grandfather was a porn addict, and he had molested his sister and him when they were younger. And so it was imposed on him at a very early age to be basically numb to this activity, and it made him later on in life become extremely promiscuous. So some of this is happening because of abuse inside of Muslim families, because we have parents addicted to pornography, and they're abusing their children. This guy had a question first. I'm sorry. Walaikum salam.
One thing I wanted to bring up is something specific that you mentioned about the, I don't remember the Arabic word you used for it, but you talked about men and women being in their sexual prime. You said a man is at his most, again, I forget the Arabic word that you used for it, you said at the age of 19.
Right.
Okay. For sake of comparison, do you know what they say is the sexual maturity for a woman?
It's usually in her 30s.
So from an Islamic perspective, when you say marry young, how does that fit in? I'm just kind of curious. Should like a 19-year-old single Muslim, should his first concern be a 30-year-old Muslim woman who's not married yet?
I don't understand your point.
What my point
Just because a woman has not reached her sexual peak until she's 30 has no bearing whatsoever on her sexual desire being there at all. That means the peak of it is 30. All the way up from puberty until that point, she has desire. The same thing is true for a 19-year-old boy. He has desire, but the peak of it is going to be 19, and then gradually it'll wane off until he reaches the grave. So there's no bearing on whether or not women have feelings toward the opposite gender. They all do.
Okay, so you don't believe that the desire equates to the sexual, to the peak, as you described it.
Now, the peak is just the peak of, that just means that's when it's the highest it'll ever be. It doesn't mean that after that or before that it was just a few points lower. Right? Just because 100% happens at 19 doesn't mean that a year before it wasn't already at 98. Do you understand? So the point I'm trying to make to you is that just because a 30-year-old woman has reached her sexual peak doesn't mean that up until that point she hasn't had deep attraction to the opposite gender, or God forbid, the same gender. Barakallahu.
All right, Assalamu alaikum, jazakallah khair. Welcome to Albuquerque.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Very nice to meet you.
So I have two questions unrelated, not directly related to this question, but very important, especially since we've been exposed to your organization here at Al-Masjid Alhamdulillah for some years now. We were wondering two things that we're struggling with this in this community. Number one is dawah, because a lot of the times some of us, when we go out, we find that we're not trained enough. Like we've read the Quran throughout our lives, but we have not found like a very efficient way of like spreading these books. Like for example, like you were talking during Jummah khutbah, like your neighbors deserve a copy of the Quran or whatever. How can we go about it, especially in the US, considering how the Mormons and all those folks do it? And the other second question.
Well, hold that second question so I can answer the first one, because my short-term memory is not that great. So to answer your first question, yes, it's a challenge for every Muslim person to engage in inviting to worship Allah and to follow His messenger, right? And so I did, you are correct, encourage all of you today to try to take a Quran copy and give it to someone in your life. Okay? What we don't need to do is copy the people of the book. We don't need to go door to door to random people we don't know and knock and try to give them Qurans. We don't need to put Qurans in people's mailboxes, although I have actually met people who became Muslim that way. I don't suggest that you get on bicycles and put on suits and ride around talking, What we need to do as average Muslims, not people trained in da'wah, is we need to work with the relationships we have. If you have a relationship with your neighbor, meaning he or she knows you, you're on good terms, right? You take his trash out sometimes he, moves garbage off your lawn, right? This kind of relationship where you know each other, right? He's been over to your house for dinner, you've been over to his house for dinner. Then that's a relationship in which it's totally and completely acceptable in our society to give people a gift. And the best gift you can give someone is the final revelation of Allah, the guidance to Jannah. So it's simple enough, it's just to present that person a gift and say, look man, I want to give you this, not because I want to change your religion, but because I just want you to know what it says. And you give someone a Quran, and there's no strings attached. They don't have to do anything with it. And they don't need to feel like you're trying to change them, because people don't like when you try to change their religion. They don't even like when you try to change their favorite type of sandwich. You're crying out loud. So what you're hoping to do by giving them that is that now they have access to it. It's in their home. They can read it whenever they want. Then you go and make dua for that person, because dua is directly related to da'wah. You ask Allah to give guidance to that person. Or maybe before you give them the Quran, you pray to the raka'ah, you ask Allah, oh Allah, cause this person's heart to soften enough to open this book and read it. That's one approach. The other approach is that you show people Islam through your actions. That you become such a representative of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that you are constantly exposing people to Islam without you having to say anything to them. So Bill comes over to eat dinner with you and your wife. He's your next door neighbor. Hey, it's Maghrib time. Bill, sit right here for a second. Me and my wife are going to go pray pray in the room next to us. It'll just take us about 5 minutes, and we'll be back to finish dinner. And you go make salah, and they see you make salah. Before you eat, you mention the name of God, but you don't always say it in Arabic because you want them to understand what you're saying. So you learn clever ways to introduce someone to Islam without preaching to them at all. And if you're truly a representative of the Prophet ﷺ, then that is going to attract people to you. And when they're attracted to you, they're going to start to ask you questions. And then, since you're not an expert, you say, you know what? These are excellent questions, and I've got a book you can read that might have some of the answers. Give them the Quran. The same thing can be said for a coworker, the same thing can be said for a classmate, a customer, anyone you have a relationship with. But random people you don't know, don't walk up and give them Qurans. It's not effective, and it's copying the people of the book. And Allah knows best. Yes, sir.
Okay, so Jazakallah kullu khair for the very important topic that you opened today.
Thank you.
But I have questions for the audience. What do you think the age that the Sheikh was targeting today? Like the most dangerous age for this? It's like 13 to 19. That's where they are inexperienced. They have this access to all this technology today, right? Where are they? This is a good crowd. Jazakumullah khair for attending. Where are your kids? Okay, so I just want to remind you with something. The Prophet ﷺ described the believers as al-bunyan al-marsus. We cannot be scattered. If we are scattered, we are lost. Al-bunyan al-marsus means we put a building stacked, similar to the stones of a building. Each one support the other. So please, I want everyone to take a look around. Do you see the majority of the young people here? They are wearing these shirts, right? They came here as a team, actually.
Stand up.
Right? So
I don't want to embarrass him.
Yeah, stand up, mashallah. Stand up.
okay. So I can assure you, from my experience with this great team, that raising good Muslims is much, much, much easier if we are doing it as a group. 4 years ago, in this masjid, we started this robotics activity that we wanted to teach our kids the technology under the umbrella of Islam. We want them to understand, to be at the peak of the science and understand what's good from what's bad. Over the past few weeks, we reached a level, alhamdulillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where these kids start to get internship from Sandia National Alliance. They went and made presentation in front of universities. A professor described their performance as, oh boy, these 14 years old and 15 years old young people that you have, they are better than the graduate student that I had in my life. Alhamdulillah. One point that the Sheikh didn't emphasize on, the source of all evil in our young people is al-faragh, spare time. You have spare time, you don't have much to do, Shaitan will force you to fill it with all bad things for you. Over the winter break, and...
May I interject for a second? Actually, yes. I did mention that.
Yeah,
in fact, when I gave a solution to the problem, I mentioned praying 5 times a day, minimum, fasting, minimum, making prayer, minimum, reading Quran every day, and staying in a state of wudu. I think that would keep a person pretty busy if they did it.
I agree with that, but like...
And I mentioned also that thing.
I just want to emphasize more on this aspect. Because over the past few weeks, since the winter break started, we had this competition coming. We met almost every day over the past 21 days. We did prayers in Jama'ah. We did Askar after Maghrib. We didn't pray Fajr together. Unfortunately, it wasn't part of our day, but inshallah, maybe in the future. But the thing that I'm trying to make is that all what we need when prayer times come is to say, we're gonna pray. And then the whole team just line up. When we don't have a practice, oh, it's very hard for me to tell my kids, go and pray. I have to convince them, leave the game, do this, do this. I'm pretty sure that this is a story of each one. All what I'm saying is that we need to come together. If we want to protect our youth, we cannot do it alone. I have heard horrific stories within this community. Everybody has a big problem that is dealing with him alone. It's much easier than to get together. I'd like to end with this. That our team so far has like 20 people involved, 20 young people. We are looking forward to expand this effort and include as many kids as we can from the community. We would like more volunteers to help us with training these kids. And alhamdulillah, last Saturday we had a great accomplishment by competing against over 20 teams from New Mexico, Arizona, and alhamdulillah we won the top 2 awards there, and we advanced to regional. Inshallah, this is when they go to these competitions.
Brother, he's a guest. Let's just hear from him first.
Absolutely, I'm almost done here. So the thing here is that when these kids go to a competition, they go as an Islamic team. They go as a representative of ICNM. That's also another layer of protection. So sorry, I do apologize for taking of your time, but this is very
important. Actually, I'll inshallah add this presentation the importance of being part of the Jama'ah, inshallah.
If you want to know more about the team, they will be in the multi-purpose area with posters about their journey. Please go ahead and take a moment to ask them about what they are.
I wanted to say something else, but I totally forgot. I don't know what it was. Parents. Man, this ayah should scare you to death. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. Talking to the dad. You and me are responsible on the Day of Judgment for our families. If we're not going to educate our children about the modern attacks of the shaitan, and he overwhelms our children, guess where you're going to be with them on the Day of Judgment. So we really need to take seriously making sure our youth are a part of the community and that they're being educated about the deen and about what to do and how to practice it. You know, too many parents are too slack with their children about praying on time. And I'm not talking about waiting until your child is 19 to start telling them to pray. No, the Prophet ﷺ said, teach your children to pray when they're 7 and then discipline them if they don't when they're 10. Because by the time they hit puberty, now they're responsible with Allah. And if you haven't already made prayer a part of their life, it's going to be very difficult for you to try to convince a 14-year-old that they need to pray 5 times a day and get up for Fajr. And especially if you don't do it. So it's just something to be aware of.
I had a second question.
Okay. Your second question requires a donation.
So if you can just keep it I realize you said that you've been a Muslim 11 years, Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
But you speak Arabic. Is there any shortcut?
I speak Arabic?
Yes.
I haven't spoken to anybody in Arabic yet.
You speak Arabic with an Arkansas accent, or?
So what would be how to make those? If you can briefly tell us, learning.
Well, I mean, I'll just be dead honest with you because I get this question a lot. I mean, guys, how miserable is it every day to pray in a language you don't understand? How miserable is it to stand for 30 nights in Taraweeh listening to a Quran you don't understand? Listening to hadith quoted in Jummah that you don't understand? Why doesn't that wake you up? Are you going to spend the rest of your life like that? I'm sorry, as someone who is an outsider who came in, I think this is foolish. That we have such a disregard for Allah's book and the statements of our Prophet that we don't even bother to learn how to read and understand them.
Bismillah. Prophet Muhammad taught Tawheed for about 11 years. That's the first thing he taught in the religion, Tawheed, the oneness of Allah. Maybe they're not teaching Tawheed right. I mean, he's too far on us to not to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially leading our salah.
And Tawheed is an Arabic word. So there's my point proven to you. So the point I'm trying to make to you is that, you know, the Arabic language is the key to this religion. If you're not going to spend any time learning it, then you are showing a great disregard for the trouble Allah went to show you. And nothing is troubling to Allah, but the point I'm trying to make is that the let's just say the trouble that his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through to guide this ummah, and the trouble that the Sahaba went through to preserve our deen for us, and all of those Muslims that came before you, and you and I don't even care about the language that our religion is preserved in. We don't care. You know, it takes a person to just sit down for 5 minutes and say, you know what, man, that's absolutely right. I call myself a Muslim, I come to the masjid, I read Quran, and I don't know what any of this means. I gotta change. So make tawbah and start learning Arabic. The first thing I did when I became Muslim after just a month or two is I said to the Shaykh, I want to learn how to read the Mus'haf. And so I started to learn. You start with letters, you move on to words and sentences, and you start learning tajweed, and then you start reading the Quran. Then you start to study, this is a noun, this is a verb, this is a sentence, these are the particles, this is the preposition. You learn new vocabulary, and you make a daily part of your life. Guys, I don't know any other way to explain this to you. The rituals of our religion are supposed to teach you self-discipline. That's at the end of the day what it is. That's what praying 5 times a day and fasting is, just teaching you self-discipline. And if you can maintain praying 5 times a day, well then you can maintain looking at an Arabic book 5 times a day. Right? Or wrong? Yes. So you don't just stay at 5 times a day with the prayer, you start adding things to your life. Once you've got a handle on that, you take on the next responsibility and the next responsibility until your entire day is just remembering Allah. In some form or fashion, everything you do becomes an act of God consciousness. So that becomes immensely easier. I mean, guys, I can tell you, when you're praying behind someone in Salah and you know what it means, man, it's a totally different experience than when you have no idea what they're saying, and this is the voice in your head. When is this going to be over? I don't know what this guy's saying. And everyone knows that voice.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, and you're doing it to yourselves. So if this redneck white guy from Brown Summit, North Carolina can take time out of his life to learn Arabic, my God, you guys that grew up as Muslims, I think you can too. You know what I mean?
Sorry, I said Arkansas, but North Carolina's what
it's all the same. It's America. We have Yankees in North Carolina too. And by the way, I'm not mastered the Arabic language. I mean, just because I can quote things for you and I pronounce them relatively correctly doesn't mean that I can sit here and have a conversation with some Saudi guy in Arabic. Because the type of Arabic they speak is like a different language to me. It doesn't even sound like Arabic half the time. In fact, a lot of times I listen to my wife talk, and she's from Yemen, and they have supposedly the most correct form of Arabic, but no, they don't. It's like they use different words, they mash words together, they have their own dialect. It's just like a different language. All right, well, I hope you all learned something, man, and really, you know, the ulama need to start speaking about this, because I see, unfortunately, massive apostasy happening in the Muslim world in the next 10 years if we don't address this issue of pornography. Because we're not making marriage any easier for people. So that's where they're going. And it's freely, wallahi, brothers and sisters in Islam, listen to this if this doesn't make you think. In Yemen right now, there is a massive war going on. People don't have gas to heat their homes, they don't have clean water, they don't have gasoline for their cars. Wallahi, those cell phone towers keep on working. Because even in a war zone, they do not want